Okay. Hmm. So, can you hear me? You can like raise hand. You can hear me okay? All right, good. Um, so I'd like to welcome all the bodhisattvas here. Um, James has a unique pronunciation. The standard Sanskrit is bodhisattvas, but everyone in Tibet had different pronunciation, right? So Bodhi, of course, means wake or awakening. Sattva means like being, like that. Um, so uh, today, before I start talking about tenets, I'd like to point out that you know, one reason I introduced tenets at this time is because I wanted people to really start climbing the mountain. The Buddha Dharma program is different than a monastic program, which has many years and has a different courses text beginning. So you should know this is fairly unique to Lions Horror. But once we start studying tenets, then it's like we're climbing the mountain, right? Because then we have to define what our thinking is. We have to question our thinking and look at our nature of mind also. So at this point in the training and practice, we should be encountering what not just the ease of accumulation and preparation, but the walk uphill of meditation. So tenets should be somewhat dramatically. We should feel like we're working with a shaman's journey where we're being dismembered, or if we were doing Christian journey, maybe we would be experiencing some crucifixion almost, because it's at this point we directly want to encounter the nature of self, and it's transformational, right? So the point of Dharma is to have not only different view of the world, but a different view of self, different view of mind. So it's going to bring up intense feelings of being lost because we're on a journey. It's going to bring up intense feelings of being found too, but also intense feelings of camaraderie and also intense feelings of abandonment. It's going to bring up problems of trust, where we'll learn to trust our mind, trust Sangha's mind and Lama's mind, but it will also bring up feelings of betrayal and lack of trust. And of course, finally, it will expose our doubt with a capital D. So I commend those people that have been reading the books and that have already done some essays. I've spent a little extra time on tenets because I know how difficult it is, even for those people not formally part of the program or not doing the papers. So I want to introduce some new material today that I think would be of benefit. Of course, we're I'm sure you've already read through this book here, like unique tenets of the middle way consequence school, right? So if I ask you what the middle way consequence school is, you should know. And here they are, here they are debating, right? So one of the reasons I structured the program this way is that if possible, I wanted to get students to learn how to do some rudimentary debate in English actually. So it's also a lot of reading about debate. But Khyentse Rinpoche, who some of you have been listening to, I hope you've been listening to, is starting to talk about debate and maybe demonstrate a little bit. So maybe we will have to stand out. We don't exactly have a courtyard, but maybe we can stand out in the parking lot to debate. What do you think? The text that I'd like to mention that I'm going to talk from tonight, I downloaded from Tushita, an FPMT center in McLeod Ganj, where Dalai Lama lives. So this is a wonderful compilation by a nun, the first nun who is now Geshe, Geshe Losang Gyatso. She's from originally from Germany, right? Does anybody know about her? She has a very interesting history, and was able to complete her studies at the Institute for Buddhist Dialectics in McLeod Ganj above Dharamsala. It's a wonderful program because Westerners are invited there and able to study, and not all the texts, not all the study is just with one school. People are reading texts and reading from all four schools. So it's a program that I'm excited about. So if anyone wants to take their studies further, that might be an opportunity. It would be difficult for some people here in Sacramento who don't know Tibetan to try to study at Sergey, right? Because they're not going to teach it English. So, and Sergey's way down in the southern part of India. So it's a little bit easier actually to get to McLeod Ganj and Institute of Buddhist Dialectics, because you can fly into New Delhi, and then nowadays you can take a plane to McLeod Ganj, so like that. But you still would have to know some basic Tibetan. I'm very glad Connor's learning Tibetan seriously now, and has my respect, because my Tibetan is very terrible. I was able to go to Sergey because I was already Lama and respected in the tradition, so they gave me a pass like that. But still, I was just doing a retreat. I wasn't able to attend classes because they're all in Tibetan. So some people are not aware that nuns from the West or nuns from the East are able to complete Geshe studies now, and that's quite a major thing, and takes many years of dedication. So I want to applaud Geshe Losang Gyatso for doing that. So I think maybe she's the RPG of Tibetan Buddhism, because it's very difficult to make it through and gain the respect and first to Geshe. So I think since maybe 2012, something like that, right? Yeah. Any questions on this before I go any further? So I'm trying to inspire you, with the joys of study, of course, and to let you know that there are these wonderful teachers. So this text is it's just called The Four Schools of Tenets. So I think you originally downloaded just from the Tushita site, right?
Yeah, the page that actually has videos of her teaching.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
You want to show it?
Sure, yeah, if you can, that would be great. Yeah, so it's very, very organized. If you join the Tibetan mentality and the German mentality, you know, it's very organized. Yeah, and it drives fast too. So yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's good. Okay, so I'm on like page 7. So the might be hard to read. I don't know, but here she's outlining the Hinayana Tenets schools. What I like that she points out in her paper here, which is quite long, is that you can be a Mahayana practitioner while holding on to Hinayana tenets, right? Like that. So when we're talking about Hinayana tenets, it doesn't mean that's we're doing Hinayana practice. But what I want to talk about today is this under the topic of selflessness. So she points out that when we're talking about Mahayana aspect, we have two things that are around the nature of the self. One is she describes as, translate, the lack of a permanent, partless, independent self. Okay. Permanent, partless, independent self. So this is what we normally think of as the Atman, right? This is like we're independent, we're not connected to anything, we could exist apart from our body and mind, right? This, in our tradition, we definitely, all the schools, refute this, right? But if when doing analytic meditation, if you find a self that is outside body and mind, I want to know about it, okay? The second one is the lack of self-sufficient, substantially existent self. So, what is that there? Self-sufficient, substantially existent self, okay? So I'd like to read a little bit from her and then comment on this. She talks about the lack of self-sufficient, substantially existent self is the understanding of a lack of a self-sufficient, substantially existing self counteracts the ignorance that perceives the existence of a self-existent, substantially existent self. I just had to read that sentence out because that's what you're going to get if you're going to read this, okay? So this ignorance is subtler than the ignorance that apprehends the existence of a permanent, partless, independent self. The mind that apprehends a self-sufficient, substantially existent self does not necessarily perceive the self to exist totally independently of the 5 aggregates. Instead, it conceives the existence of a self to which the mind and body belong, like the owner or governor, something that has different characteristics than they do, and possesses, controls, and utilizes them, thinking mind. Furthermore, there's a sense that one's own mind and body could be exchanged for another person's mind and body, that oneself could become the owner of another person's psychophysical aggregates. So what she is talking about here in this second aspect that we also refute in Mahayana is probably how most people think of their selves, how it feels. So I found most students can easily say, yes, of course, there's not a partless, independent, permanent self. Got it. But it feels like there's kind of a self that's somehow connected and inside the body and mind, yeah? And that owns it. Isn't that the felt sense? I think so. And one seems the permanent, partless, one Atman kind of self would say, does feel like, okay, I get that. But the second part, she says more subtle. I think it's very subtle and very difficult to go after because don't you have a sense that you kind of own your experience? That it's like mine? When I'm in my, everyday dualistic consciousness, that's the way it feels to me. So she goes on to say, from a Buddhist point of view, a self-sufficient, substantially existing self is impossible because an owner of the five aggregates which possesses, controls, and utilizes them cannot be found. Also, it is not possible to isolate one's person self and exchange his mind and body for the mind and body of someone else, since a person's self is characterized by his mind and body. So that's kind of interesting. Maybe you weren't thinking that you were going to exchange your self for someone else, or that you could become an owner of another person's psychophysical aggregates, right? But we have to unpack that a little bit. So this goes very subtle too, because when we're doing daily life, many times we feel just taken up or absorbed with someone else's personality or with their speech, right? It feels like we're with them, and it's like this doesn't. I think it feels like that somewhat. Or if you're very close to someone, you're giving them a hug, or you're sitting next to them, or making love, or whatever we're doing, it feels like this emerging, and you feel like you could almost exchange selves, don't you think? It certainly sounds romantic anyway. So, but in our Mahayana tradition, actually, you one else now really comes to so selves. But it feels that way, doesn't it? So we feel like we're independent and self-sufficient, and then at times we feel like we can also kind of inhabit someone or melt into them, or they can merge into us. So I'd like to stop and have a short sharing and discussion to see if either I'm making sense or not making sense, or Geshe Yeshe making sense or not making sense. This is where someone speaks up, and says, oh, that's true for me. Or someone says, no, that's not true for me.
Lama, it's Ellen. I was gonna ask a question, but I'm afraid it will expose my limited view. But so if my experience is not my own, and it seems like there's kind of a mixing of ultimate and relative in this discussion, because there's no consciousness from an alternate perspective, but there is sort of a consciousness aggregate. And I have an experience from that perspective, but I wonder if it's not my own, then whose is it? Is it doesn't exist at all, or it's shared, or what? Or is it just that I don't own it in a solid way like I think I do?
It's definitely like your own, in the sense that that imputation of self is connected with your aggregates. But when we say own, it means like control. So like I own this glass because when I pick it up, it just yields, and when I put it down, it just stays. You know, it'll do exactly what I want it to do. So if we examine things closely, actually, we don't own very much, right? We should actually, you know, kind of say, my heart owns me, right? Because if our heart gives out, then your mind's going to leave, right? So if we owned our body, we would be able just to extend its life, right? So when we say own, there's that sense of control. It's our property, so we could do what we want with it.
Mm.
But, so it is kind of true that we're renters. I like that. We're renting. Someone, yeah, like that. We're paying rent to everybody at the same time. I'm not sure, does that get what you're talking about? That
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. It's that I think what she's talking about is that sense that it is something we control rather than just maybe cause and effect that's happening. And we don't usually view it as it's just happening.
well, it isn't just happening. We do have influence, but when I say control or own, you know, we're using very kind of logical categories. It doesn't, it's either you do or you don't. So Buddhist logic is very clear that you either do or you don't, right?
Mm.
So there's no third, right? There's no middle. Like we know from reading Nagarjuna, there's like, we can't say, well, we both have it and we don't have it. There's no middle. We can't say, well, we have and we own it, but we don't own it. It's either right, we do or you don't. So owning means like you really, it goes exactly the way we want it to all the time. And if we say it'll just be like a slave, but it isn't like that. However, we do deeply influence, and we also, we influence things, right? We initiate behaviors. It just doesn't happen. So, so one of my favorite demonstrations is, of course, hand, you know, put out hand. And how is it that, you know, one moment it's like this and one moment like that? So I like to ask people that think they've advanced far on the path, like, how do you do that? Right? Who's doing that? Yeah. So it's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Lama, this is Karen. I had a question for you. You know, definitely, I don't feel like I own everything that occurs in my body or my thoughts or whatever. You know, I don't feel like I own 100% all that stuff or have control of it entirely. But then what I got mixed up when you were talking about what she was writing about, and then you talked about like emerging with another person. You know, I mean, I've certainly had the experience where it seems like have awareness or some experience of other person's experience, but it doesn't feel like I've merged with them or anything. It's just some sort of sharing, or, you know, maybe that sounds too freakish, but that's kind of my experience. Is that what she's saying?
Yeah. This. So I'm adding a little bit to it, but what we're talking about when there's you can't exchange. It feels like when we're in our screwed up sense of self, it feels like we could exchange. It feels like the self could like go into things and move around and, you know, kind of like be in someone else and then get out of it and that kind of thing. It feels like the self is, it feels like the self is somewhat transportable like that. Like we could merge, or we could then enter someone else, or they could enter us, like that.
No, I didn't mean it like that for me. It's
Yeah.
more like that. It's not something that I control. I don't control it. So it might change with time, but it's not like I'm controlling that sense of whether or not I think I'm sharing some sort of energy or something with somebody else.
Well, all of this is about like how we define identity, correct? So the big problem that Buddha Dharma tackles is really how we define identity. Like who do we think we are? Who's doing all this? Who's doing it to whom? And what's going on and how does it work? But what's really characterizes so much the core is this sense of identity. How is that formed and how does it dissolve? And how is that able? So if the self was very solid, if the self had this style of the misperceived self had this style, then we wouldn't be able to transcend it. It would be too solid and it would be too independent, right? It would be too willful. So isn't it so when we're trying to work with others that we're just even trying to help them, that it seems like they're just not responding. They're acting too independently, right? We should be able to have more influence or control, right? So
I don't get that sense. I don't get the sense
that's
that other.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I barely have, a sense of my own identity as it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like it's very tenable.
Right.
And
so from we don't stop there, of course, in Dharma. So we're not in this situation. It's left unsaid. Well, what is our true identity then, right? If we're saying our identity is not a permanent self or self-sufficient self, that it's both selfless and empty, then what is our identity? So, right, in this little piece, we're left a little bit hanging, right? So it's not saying, well, what really is going on? So if we had to assert, well, our real identity, our real sense of who we are, what we say from the point of view of the Hinayana schools, and what would we say from the standpoint of the Mahayana schools, right? So that's important. So if we say it's not this and it's not that, we also have to say, well, it's not nothing, right? It's not a negative emptiness, right? So what would it be? So if we're not a self-sufficient self or permanent self, then what's going on here? Would anybody like to take a stab and identify which school they would be talking from? Could give it a try.
Lama, could you repeat the question, please?
Okay, so we're refuting a certain kind of self, a certain kind of identity here, right? But we're not just leaving it there in nihilism. Or at least I'm not tonight, right? I don't want you to go home and go, well, we're not a permanent self, we don't know anything, let's just kind of drive around and hopefully we'll get home, right? No. So who are we? What are we actually doing? So we have to say something about that, right? So who wants to take a stab at that? Okay.
Phenomena people and life around us? Like the other side?
Yeah, so what's our essential nature?
Empty.
Yeah, we're empty from our own side, they're empty from their side. So that's putting it from what's not there, right? But what is there? Who's doing all this? So I don't know. if people can hear you. Yeah. Who's doing all this? Lineage, yeah. So let's go deep. Let's go deep. Like, okay, so when we're reading Madhyamaka in Tenets, also had you read some of Maitreya's works, right? So we didn't put Tara Tantra Shastra, the Lama on the reading list, but as we've gone along, I've said, well, maybe you ought to read, Buddha Nature, right? So Maitreya's treatise called Uttara Tantra Shastra, the continuum, right? Sometimes just called the divine continuum. So, so that should be enough of a hint, but
well, I was going to say Buddha nature, but so I will say that.
Okay, so that's a winner. Well, it's not lineage. What'd you say? Oh, yeah, okay. Patty said Buddha nature too. Yeah. Yeah. So so maybe we'll have to do more readings. It's important in our tradition. It makes it simple to think about three, just for the point of discussion, three basic phenomena, right? We can talk about outer phenomena like tables and chairs and trees, right? And we can talk about inner phenomena like thoughts and emotions and mental states and sensations, right? So we could say those are kind of like inner and outer phenomena. Then we're going to talk about nature of self, right? Like we're doing today. So that in a way is a phenomena, this identity. So it feels a little bit different than talking about tables and chairs, right? So we have phenomena, self, and what would be the third thing that is absolutely necessary for us to realize in order to be free and to attain awakening. What would be the third phenomena? Heroic beings you could take a guess now. So what's left out? We have self, we have phenomena. What's left? So in this sense, well, but if we weren't using the term Buddha nature, which is a style of talking, what would we say?
Non-self.
We
Consciousness.
would say nature. Consciousness is still going to be Vijnana, but we would say nature mind. Okay, nature mind, right? That's what we're realizing in Mahamudra and Dzogchen, right? Nature mind. So we want to understand phenomena. So public phenomena we can see. We want to understand tricky inner phenomena also. But ultimately, we have to understand nature mind. We have to understand our Buddha nature mind. when we're talking about it as identity, in a sense, we could say, Buddha nature. But when we're talking about what is it that characterizes our Buddha nature, what is it that most epitomizes our Buddha nature? What is it that's the core of our Buddha nature?
What you just said, nature of mind.
Okay, well, what is the nature of mind?
Do you mean qualities like luminosity?
Yeah, luminosity. What else?
Spaciousness.
Spacious, open, empty.
Clarity.
Clarity. That's clarity and luminosity, kind of the same thing. Yeah. Luminosity is a much sexier word. I like luminosity. So, we're missing a prime quality.
Free from conceptual elaborations?
Yeah, closer. Getting warmer. That's describing how it manifests. Yeah.
Clear light mind emptiness?
It has to be clear light mind. Yeah. The knowing, right? It has to be the knowing, the wisdom mind, the ability of mind to recognize. We don't recognize if we don't know, which eventually culminates in Yeshe and Rigpa. Like you all should have first name for taking refuge, Yeshe, right? Jhana, primordial awareness, like that. Rigpa, knowing, primordial knowing, right? So we must have that, so we must recognize the empty, open nature of awareness, which just like the particular self, when we go look for it as an entity, can we find it or not? What do you think?
Not.
Not. Yeah. But something's going on, right? Something's, we're looking for it, They don't say, when you go looking for a relationship, you won't find it, right? You want it to come to you. Finding nature of mind, we do have to search and find out what isn't there, but we do also have to search and find out how it does manifest, even though we can't find it in the way we normally think we can find things. Okay. So later, as we become more advanced in our studies, there are some wonderful poems or kind of long prayers that we can work on. One is there's a text that Trungpa Rinpoche has put out, that he went over text from a wonderful Geshe, and then Nipa made a commentary on that, and then Trungpa Rinpoche made a commentary on that. So it's harmonizing and talking about tenets and Mahamudra and Dzogchen at the same time. So I might be able to teach from that. But since all three of these texts make the assumption, because they're talking to professionals, that we know the tenets and we know the meditation systems, then we have to learn those first, or we'll come away with the idea that's a beautiful poem, but you won't get the true significance. Yeah. So who am I missing here? So how many people are here today? So yeah, so yeah, good. So we need the intellectual study to develop certainty. It's a certainty that must come through intellectual study, and then there's a certainty that must come through direct experience, and those two need to be joined. If you haven't developed real certainty through intellectual study and just try to meditate, then it's going to be more difficult. Likewise, if you just do intellectual study and not meditate, then difficult, right? Those two kinds of certainties need to come together. If you just do a meditation, then the tendency is the intellectual side of mind will still bring up the doubts and it will derail you. And of course, if you're just doing the intellectual study, you will still be so-called attacked by very strong kleshas, right? Because the very strong kleshas, the very strong ignorance, the very strong grasping, the very strong aversion, which comes together as fear, can overwhelm you. Isn't that so? But generally, all the great teachers, Lama Tsongkhapa, Padmasambhava, and then more recently, of course, Dalai Lama, Mipam Rinpoche, Pato Rinpoche, all have emphasized that you must develop the certainty of the intellect and the certainty of the meditation. And without the shamatha practice and concentration, then it's difficult. So that's my little soapbox, okay? So when doing tenets, we particularly need to not just focus on what phenomena are true and what the nature of self is, but also take our meditation experience and look at the nature mind. Like how do we know that, right? I mean, who knows that? Who's talking right now, right? We must come to that kind of deep realization like that. So, as I've said many times, if I ask you and Darshan said, "Who's here?" and you just go, "Me." If I was a little tougher Lama like my teachers, I would just ring the bell. The session would be over. I'm not that cruel. I'm still talking to people. I just laugh, right? But it would be more like useful to say, like, I don't know. But we know we're still in normal, and by norming the norm of samsara is like, if so goes, well, me. Is that all we can do? No, we can do better than that, right? What do you think? Let's have a short discussion. That's what they do in India, yes. Okay. Tibetans don't do that, Indians do that. But it's good for your neck. Yes.
In some way, she knows it really well, knows the trigger point. In that moment, like, rises as a result of that moment. In that moment, that's good. It's the opportunity Okay, so the opportunity to look directly at that one that was feeling really good or whatever, that this is why a strong emotion for the person up.
From tantric point of view now. So Patty is here as attendant, and she asks, well, I don't know why she picked this example, but she says, when the Lama insults you, then that's a particularly wonderful opportunity to examine. It is, but I should say also when the Lama praises you, right? So that usually praise also the sense of self, misperceived self arises strongly too, doesn't it? But we always prefer praise to blame, right? But if we're developing equanimity, we can look and both praise and blame or insult, they both have the same nature, right? As phenomena, right? And then, of course, if we've had some teachings, which some of you have, Mahamudra and Dzogchen, then we have the ability to look at the nature of awareness directly at that point, right? That's an opportunity. But we don't have to wait until we're praised or insulted, you know, the opportunity is always there. So I'm not sure, I don't know if Dirk came on for a few moments, but if he's in Pennsylvania, I'm not sure, but it would be 11 o'clock Pennsylvania time, isn't that so? I think so. So, oh, in Nebraska, so okay, just maybe just 2 hours, 1 or 2 hours difference, yeah. So when we studied the tenets and studied the different systems, we want to see and continue the yogic meditation, then we want to compare those two, right? So the intellectual understanding, I'm using that in a positive way, and the experiential understanding should match up, right? They should like dovetail like that. So in our tradition, when I say our tradition, jhana tradition of any of the schools, all the way up to Mahā'ati, we're not, throwing out the intellect. We want the intellect and experience to be like a dovetail, right? So they don't have to be like, sometimes use the term 2 hours meeting in the air, right? But I like that term like dovetailing. I used to do some woodworking. So they're not going to look exactly alike, but they fit together. Isn't that so? Yeah. So if people want to have an overview of the tenet system from a very organized Western Geshe, wonderful Geshe, then you can visit the site at Tushta. But I also want you to read this book, which is actually a pretty fast read. Because look at how big, look, it's in bold, and it's fairly big height. The notes are not super big, but is that encouraging? Yeah. And there's a wonderful introduction by Daniel Koza. So we have to learn this stuff. All the teachers I've studied with wouldn't let me get away with just reading a couple of Dharma talks, right? That's for devotees, which I respect. I love devotees, but if you want to develop the higher meditations, then it's necessary to do these studies. Yeah. So my own teacher, Geshe Gyatso, wouldn't give higher teachings until I was substantially done with Nindro, and would not give would wait until you finished it. And I've told a number of times, so I said, okay, I finished my Nindro, and then he would say, well, Lama Tsongkhapa did 1 million, right? So a couple of people have mentioned that they wanted to do like Nindro, which is a difficult practice. So entrance into Tantra, so to speak. But, I preferred a little bit, except for certain individuals, for people to learn to do the sutra level practice, because that practice lets us gain strong confidence in intellect. So if you're still having intellectual doubts, you must resolve them through study. If you're having meditative doubts, you must resolve them through meditation. And if you're having life doubts, you must see how they dovetail together, right? Like that. So you won't be allowed, so to speak, to pass Mahamudra Dzogchen with doubts. You can't answer Zen koans from a reputable teacher with doubts. Right now, we are absolutely certain about incorrect things, right? We don't even have to say, like we just say me, like that. So we're absolutely certain about incorrect things. So, which are actually harder to be certain about, right? We should think like that. It's harder to be certain about uncertain things, that delusions. It's actually easier to be certain about certain things because they make sense. So this idea that in Western education that you're continually skeptical is not a Vajrayana path. We're investigating and we want to know how it works, but we don't believe in absolutism or eternalism. We don't believe in the absolutism of nihilism, and we don't believe in the absolutism of skepticism, right? And we don't believe in the New Age bullshit of we can have our cake and eat it too. In other words, we can have both and. No, you can't. Is that disappointing? It should be disappointing a little bit, right? So we should have a little disappointment. We want it kind of both and, right? Can we have kind of a little bit of both, right? What do you think? It should be a little disappointing. Dang it. So in studying tenets, particularly, you want to come to the same kind of certainty that we're looking for in God Dorji's 3 essential points, right? Some of you who have been able to have the good fortune to do short retreats we've done at Lotus View Ranch, where I've introduced the 3 points God Dorji with like commentary by Patra Rinpoche and Vijay Rinpoche. Does anybody remember those? I know Ellen does. You get a pass. Yeah, so that's one, yeah. So what's the first one? 3 points. Okay, a little hint. Starts with the like direct. Then what? Right, just try, so you get points for trying in Dharma. That's the third one. Direct pointing out. Direct pointing to nature mind. Okay. then then deciding on just this one, this is it. Okay, so no doubt, it's a certainty. That's it, right? So direct, and then complete. Deciding on this one point. That's it. Then the third one. I know Michelle already said, but what's the third? Yeah. So every.
Was it confidence?
Pardon me?
Was it confidence?
No, confidence is the second one. Complete confidence, complete certainty. Yeah. So then everything that manifests completely is self-liberated. Because it's funny, just even kind of in the path, we see nature of awareness, and we go, that's it. But then, because things are always arising from the ground, basic ground, then we get kind of confused again, right? We go, I don't know. Well, is the next thought? Is that what's that, right? So then we need that insight that sees thought arises and is self-liberated, and doesn't take any particular effort on our part, right? We don't have to that's why we don't have to let go, right? So of course in Hinayana practice, of course, we've got tons of stuff going on, so we have to tell people to let go, right? Or we could say a little more subtle level, it comes apart like a snake, right? And does like a snake. But actually, you don't have to do anything. So, like in Chalopa's instructions from the Ganga to Naropa, then just that's like resting, right? Don't. No. It has to be a little don't. So, but to not do anything, to rest like that, to not take the bait, then we still have to see nature mind and develop that certainly that's it. Can't be anything else, right? So somebody gets to say the last word or something, right? Say goodbye or have a last question before we sign off tonight. Lama.
Thank you, Lama.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Was that a good final phrase?
So I like Zima's laugh, So at one point in my practice, I was studying Rinzai Zen, along with studying at Naropa and Vajrayana. So I thought I would bring Sasaki Roshi to Boulder, which I did, and introduce them to the folks in Pearl Street. So Trungpa Rinpoche wasn't there, but some of the American teachers were. So I was hoping, this is how you always deal with teachers. I was hoping Roshi would say something or give a talk, or he would ask questions. And so we got to this elaborate reception room at Karmazan, and finally one of the senior teachers, it might have been Reggie Ray or Carl or somebody, and I said, well, what what do you like to teach, or what's your teaching? And she said, I don't teach anything at all. I just, came to make people laugh like that. So it would suggest, like, instead it would say, it's important to get up every morning and do a laughter meditation, right? And this was like in 1970s, right? So that was before laughter yoga. So it's an authentic Zen thing, authentic Vajrayana thing too. So just one way to study is with a good sense of humor, I think. That's good. Okay. Anybody else before we say goodnight tonight? There's a lot of laughter in debates, right? So it's really funny because in debates you have to say something, right? Most people here are quiet, but in debates, you're going to have the challenger, like that, and the defender of the position or the tenant is sitting there. But if the defender doesn't say anything, they kind of get booed off the stage, actually. Kind of like, I mean, if you're totally dumbstruck and just kind of like, oh shit, and you can't say anything, they'll give you a pass for a couple of minutes. But if you just don't say anything, then a big stick comes along, kind of drags you. No, not seriously. But they'll make fun of you. Yeah, they'll make fun of you. So yeah, that's the worst. Yeah, then they'll give you nicknames. They'll give you nicknames. So in doing Tenets class, even if you don't know, like, and you think you don't know anything, then just come prepared to say something. Okay. So I'm trying to treat you guys like really, like we're really doing it, not like Western college class where you can sit there. So like, and of course, in a private class, like this is kind of at the Lama's Lebrang or their house. Then they'll just call on you, right? You can't hide out. So classes are given in different places, but a lot of times after someone's graduated and they have supporters, then outside the monastery or sometimes inside, then the Lama will actually have kind of their own house. Maybe people didn't know that, right? Did you know that? No. So my friend Geshe Gendon had his own house, Sarah, where he would meet with people. And since he traveled a lot and was mostly now like in Boston, he wanted to sell. So, Chris Wing and I bought the house and gave it to Sarah J. So a beautiful house overlooking the whole monastery, and you'd see the clouds rolling in the afternoon. So it's just lovely. So back then in the 90s or early 2000s, it was a deal for $35,000, but that was a lot of money for me back then, right? So now Geshe Gendon's probably given out of his apartment, So my Lebrang is more like middle way health, right? But everyone has to say something. So you should become prepared to say something, even if it's kind of a little, like you don't know. Just you have to come up with something, right? Then that's a typical way to go through the sense of misperceived self, right? Because generally, we don't care if people are angry at us, or generally people are angry. We just dismiss that person, or we don't care if we don't get our chocolate cake, or we don't care if we lose this. But one thing we really don't like is we don't want to be look stupid in front of others, right? It's really strong, and I think so in the monastery we utilize that. Like, we know you don't want to look stupid in front of your peers, right? You don't want to be humiliated, So that's a real grasping ego thing. Yeah. So Karen's going, I'm okay with that. I'm good. You know, it's all right.
I'm okay. Look stupid.
Yeah, I know. It's good. So you speak up, you know, and Ellen speaks up too, and Susan speaks up, you know. So you know, I don't always say, oh, well, that's brilliant to Ellen, or that's brilliant to Susan, or brilliant to Karen, you know. So they speak up, and we just try something, right, like that. And of course, Dirk speaks up too. I don't know today, but so usually James speaks up too, you know, but like that. So the other thing that happens in the monastery a lot is like if someone's kind of like doing a recitation, then in informal settings, just like now, you could teachers, oh, you didn't pronounce that right, or you didn't pronounce that right, right? They'll say, do it over. Well, we didn't have time. We do it over, right? So in rituals, people say, why do we do rituals? Well, of course, that joins people together. But rituals is really an opportunity to expose, you know, the I, me, mine, right? Like that. So it's very strong. So it isn't just like when anger comes up or pride. So when we're doing rituals and somebody says, no, you picked up the bell the wrong way, right, or something, then that's always an interesting place, right? We don't like that, do we? We don't like people correcting on it. Yeah. I know, it's so small. It's so hurtful. Like if you're trying to be romantic and somebody says, oh, I don't like what you're doing. Doesn't that feel horrible? It does, doesn't it? Yeah. At the end, you feel like, oh, you know, yes, it like that didn't feel good, or like, did you take a shower? I don't think you took a shower. Like, ew, like the spinach or something. You know, we don't like that, right? But you learn it. Vajrayana, we carry on, right? We carry on. So I'm particularly interested in, you know, promoting, you know, the incredible strength it took for Geshe Losang Gyatso to follow through, you know, and that incredible intrepid nuns and you know, both Eastern and Western who have completed their studies. So I wanted to add that tonight. So please check it out, okay? All right, so we need to close. So we should do dedication, right?
Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Greg, do you want to take it from here? In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good, all-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso. Please remain until samsara ends.
So that's good, James. I like you trying to pass it off there. That's smart. You'll go far.
Thank you.
So let's do for Jada Rinpoche.
May the teachings of the Buddha flourish, and may the upholders of the teachings remain forever. May all migrators achieve happiness, and may they fulfill all. Losang, magical display of the deep awareness of victorious ones. Merciful giver of a stream of profound and vast instructions to the fortunate migrators, please remain always unperishing, unchanging, unfading. Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of objectless compassion, Manjushri, master of flawless wisdom, Vajrapani, destroyer of the entire host of Maras, Tsongkhapa, crown jewel of the snowy land sages, Losang Drakpa, I make request at your holy feet.
Yeah, so that's good. So our umzes have been really good, you know, like James and like Roberta and Susan Ellen, like, you know, you kind of belt it out there, you know, that's good. Remember how like Dirk would do it? Yeah, very strong, right? Like that. So, all right, I'm gonna say good night. All right, sweet dreams. Do your dream yoga. All right.
All right.
Thank you, Lama.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lama, and good night.
Good
Thank you.
night.
Thank you, Lama. Good
Yeah.
night.
That's good.
Thank you. Good night.